Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And my name is Libing Wang. I'm working for UNESCO Asia and the Pacific Regional Bureau for Education, based in Bangkok, Thailand. I've been there for 5 years. I'm in charge of higher education, technical and vocational education and training, education for sustainable development, teacher education, and also non-formal education. So we have a very big portfolio under me. And this is the second time for me to come to this important meeting. And today, I just want to share with you some of the very simple message. I don't want to give you a very heavy slides with so many ideas. No, just want to give you very simple ideas. I think the first message I would like to share with you is really to make the education and the training system more driven by the demands or by the customers rather than by supply side. This is the key, actually, to any of the educational reforms, because we have seen so many skills mismatch, right? And I think Korea is quite good in overcoming this kind of middle income track by investing a lot in education and training. And you are a good example of middle income countries or to move upward into high income countries. So I think I'm not going to follow my slides, but actually the slides is serving to a kind of purposes to remind me of the things. I think it's very important if I can start with the mentioning of the new SDG 4 or Education 2030, which is a global education agenda, which was adopted in the Republic of Korea 2 years ago in Incheon. This kind of new agenda is very, very special because this is really different from the previous Millennium Development Goals. As you know, United Nations is planning for every 15 years, right? United Nations is planning for every 15 years, and in the year 2000, we came up with the Millennium Development Goals, with education listed in the Millennium Development Goals, but it's mainly focusing on basic education. But if you have a look at the new agenda, you can see the new education agenda is very comprehensive. It's covering not only basic education, but also TVET and higher education. So I would see the importance of development of the technical and the vocational education and the training and the higher education in the whole economy development. It's very important. I mean, Korea has been serving as a good example for UNESCO. Always, we are mentioning Korea. We are seeing that Korea is investing a lot in education, even ahead of economic development. And you are really benefiting from receiving enough supply of qualified, skilled laborers and all this kind of support, human resource support. So this is about, I mean, very much about SDG 4. And you can see the concrete target under SDG 4 is like SDG 4.3, which is exactly related to technical and vocational education and the training. And the UNESCO is now very much hope that member states can really have a kind of integrated approach to post-school education, including tertiary education and the university education. And I realized that in Korea, you have different separate ministry in charge of education and the training. But it seems that you have a very good coordination between it. We also would like to see good policies in quality assurance and to make, you know, all the qualifications comparable and promoting the recognition of higher education qualifications. One thing I would propose to you to be the theme of the next year's, perhaps next year's workshop, is about the skills migration. Because you are now facing the challenge of aging society, and you are lack of skilled laborers, actually. Normally, countries are competing for best brains, which is very high end, right? United States is really getting the best brains from all over the world. But at the same time, we can see in Australia, they are trying to bring people, skilled laborers, from other countries. And I think it's also happened in Korea. And the skilled migration can be one of the topics, I think, which can be, discussed in the next meetings. Of course, we can also see Target 4.4 is also about skills, for technical and vocational skills for employment and decent work and entrepreneurship. 2 weeks ago, UNESCO Bangkok is just organized a meeting on entrepreneurship education in Manila, in the Philippines. And we are really happy to see so many countries, they put entrepreneurship education as one of their important national strategies to make the higher education and the training system more relevant to the needs of the market. We said nowadays the relationship between demand and the supply is very complicated. If a system is supply-driven, it's a planning economy, right? Which is based on the consumption that somebody is knowing better than the people, right? This is a kind of planning approach. But the advantage is that if we are doing planning, we can prioritize resources. And this is exactly what the developing country wants. But on the other side, if we want to introduce more market-driven economy, we need to introduce more demand-driven economy and a demand-driven higher education and the training system. I think the relationship between demand and the supply is very complicated. You know Steve Jobs. He never did any market survey, but what he introduced, the products, was so popular. And I've got to say that actually the supply side also has a responsibility to create demand. So this is quite complicated. And I think also we also would like member states to talk about the quality assurance based on national qualifications framework. So this is about also SDG 4.B, which is about scholarship. And I think Korea is very generous. You said after the Second World War, Korea benefited a lot from international aid organizations like UNESCO. And now it's time for you to pay back, right? And we are quite moved by the position of Korea. You are spending so much on developing this ODA project for other countries. But this one is also, I think Korea contributed a lot already. The next message I just want to share with you is to expand strategically. Because I know that you have a very big higher education system expanded. Gross enrollment ratio in Korea is nearly 70%. Everybody can go to the university, right? But of course, go to a prestigious university is also very competitive. But in terms of gross enrollment ratio, it's already very high. Let's have a look at the early experiences from the European countries. They never expand university system. What they did expand is the non-university public higher education sector. Like in the United Kingdom, you have seen the expansion of polytechnics, which is very much technical and vocational program rather than traditional academic, market-driven, employment-oriented. And I would say that the expansion of higher education, how to assess the outcome of the expansion, the soft landing of this kind of expansion should be measured by the employment rates, by the salary levels of the first employment, these kind of things. And I think it's quite understandable that in Korea, I mean, you did very well. And actually, you have a very good system. 2 days ago, I visited two very good university, TVET institutions. One is called JEI University in Incheon. Another is Yangyong Digital High School, vocational school. So good. Not only equipment is good, but also it's a kind of a curriculum development and there's a connection with the industry. I just want to say that it's very important to distinguish 3 types of learning programs. Traditionally, we have too many academic programs. University professors are very strict to the academic programs, right? They are very elegant. They are working alone. I used to be a professor. We are not happy to be instructed by people outside the university, right? And you also, in Korea, you cooperatize Seoul National University, right? Which means the ministry cannot directly instruct universities to do this and that, right? They are more autonomous. But actually, I would suggest to maintain the level of academic program, don't produce too many PhDs, right? I think in some countries, many people are overqualified. And somebody who are working in the primary school also have a PhD, right? Maybe I think in Korea also. That's a waste of human resources and also a waste of educational resources. It makes the system not relevant and cost effective. So I think academic program should be, which is more preclinical or theoretical courses, should not be expanded. High vocational programs, I know that in Korea you also have high school level vocational schools, but you should also expand or upgrade this vocational education into tertiary education level. And I think that the courses are mainly practical, skills intensive, employment oriented, and market driven. The third type of program is called professional program, which is just a combination of clinical and clinical courses, which means that you need to have a kind of theoretical background or academic background. This is a kind of things, I think this is not the latest, but we just change a little bit. It's not based on data, but actually we would like to see top traditional universities. You should have a more academic program, decent professional program, but less technical and vocational education program, right? For new universities, maybe less academic, but more professional programs and decent level of higher vocational education. But for polytechnics and tertiary institutes, should be mainly high technical and vocational. So it's a kind of combination of the proportion among academic, professional, and high vocational. It's depending on how you position your universities. It's related to the mission statement of the universities. But nowadays, I would say the boundary between professional, vocational is blurred. Because as you can see, professional occupations usually regulated by relevant government ministries, like medical doctor. I think in Korea also, medical doctor is under Ministry of Public Health. But vocational occupations regulated by Ministry of Labor, which is every country, they produce a skilled occupation list, which are updated quite often, maybe every half year, like a bricklayer and chef, all these kind of vocational occupations. We have seen the convergence of of curriculum to include more theoretical, practical, and on-the-job training. So it's a matter of combination. You know, how do you combine this? And skills-based and competence-based, from skills-based to competency-based. You have a national competency standards, right, by different professions. So we need to actually introduce a more holistic approach to learning outcomes, not only including competencies, but also values, attitudes, and other soft skills, as Korea was proposing education for global citizenship, which are really very much pushed by the government of Korea. And the UNESCO is now following this kind of education for global citizenship. And other point I would also to draw your attention is the shift of quality assessment from inputs to learning outcome, and the way and the processes to achieving learning outcome. As you know, we have a saying, actually. I know that in Korea you are very good in this, how do you call this, black and white chess, Go, right? English is called Go. You have Li Changhao, right? Li Changhao, and I don't know if it's very popular. Traditional chess, black and white, right? It's also very popular in Japan. But we have a saying that actually if you are focusing too much on outcomes, then you are not going to enjoy the process, right? Football match, World Cup football match, the final of the World Cup is always very boring because people are too much focusing on the outcome, right? And then you cannot enjoy the process, right? But for quality assessment, inputs is always being represented by how many professors, how many research money, all these kind of things, how many equipment. Outcome is the learning outcome. But the way to achieving this learning outcome is equally important, which is something to do with pedagogy. So I would say that nowadays we need to pay more attention to the learning outcomes. And the national qualification framework can be serving as an overarching framework to cover different professional education programs. So we are not very much keen to promote national qualifications framework because it originated in the United Kingdom and was followed and implemented by many Commonwealth countries. But China, Korea, and Japan do not have this kind of tradition. But I'm very happy to see that in Japan, the Ministry of Education already commissioned a study, feasibility study, on the development of national qualification framework. 2 days ago, we had a workshop organized by the Korean Ministry of Education on national qualification framework. And it's very likely that you can develop a kind of national qualification framework which is not only covering TVET, but also higher education. It's a comprehensive. Now, national competency standards is more related to technical and vocational education and training. We would also propose to develop a quality culture within the higher education institutions to internalize external quality standards. In June this year, UNESCO Bangkok organized a regional conference on quality assurance in higher education. And we came up with a kind of consensus document saying that external relationship between internal and external is also a kind of very dynamic relationship. It's changing all the time. If university is strong, external can be weak. If external regulation is very strong, you would undermine, the capacity inside the universities. So what we propose is that external mechanism is really eventually should be for the capacity building of the internal quality assurance mechanism. So this is the kind of statement we produced. We are saying that nowadays learning outcome and the way to achieving learning outcome is very important. And we also think that it's also equally important to develop a culture of quality, to make the academic community within the university more mature and more self-discipline, and it's a kind of quality culture which will be secured. So this is what we would like to see. Of course, nowadays we are also promoting the triangle relationship between competence, subject competencies, pedagogical studies, and ICT competencies. University professor is very good in subject studies, but they never did much on pedagogical studies, right? So that's the difference between university professor and the school teacher. Because school teacher, you have to think of many of the pedagogical issue, but they never do any research on in the subject area. University professor can be very good researchers, but they cannot automatically be a good teacher, right? So this is why we are proposing for the teaching staff not only to be qualified in subject knowledge, skills, and competencies, but also well-trained in the pedagogical study and ICT competencies. I'm happy to know that in Seoul National University, actually, they have a very strong teaching and learning supporting unit, which are not only help teaching staff with the capacity building of ICT competencies, but also pedagogy innovations. So this is a kind of things, we just would like a teaching personnel in the university really to think research is no longer enough. You should be pedagogically also qualified, and you also should have ICT competencies. Okay. Of course, learning outcome should be holistic. Learning outcomes should be holistic, which means that which should be including knowledge, skills, competencies, values, attitudes, should include non-cognitive and transversal skills. So I think every curriculum should be balanced, not only focusing on knowledge and skills. NQF, as you can see from the slides, it's actually a kind of progressive levels of, just to define different levels of qualifications in terms of learning outcomes. We call the level descriptor. And you can see in the past, different levels of education only connected on table, right? But if we have a kind of national qualification framework, we can make sure that all these different levels of education can be vertically and horizontally connected. And by the engagement with the stakeholders, it's also to ensure internal and external coherence and make different types and forms of learning recognizable, transferable, and even portable with certain credits which are recognized. So that's why UNESCO Bangkok is really pushing very hard for the development of national qualification framework. Fortunately, we got financial support from the Korea government in the form of Korea Funds in Trust to develop a regional guideline for national qualifications framework. And later this month, later next month, we are going to have another meeting to talk about subject-specific quality standards, which are under national qualifications framework. I think this is something we just want to pursue collectively with all the countries, and I would just last slides to inform you that last year we did a regional survey on the status of national qualifications framework in Asia and the Pacific. We sent out our survey to 33 countries. We get responses from 28 countries. you can see different levels of development. We have 3 countries which already implement national qualification framework, and it's now going through the midterm review of the structure. We also have 4 countries which have a national qualification framework well established. We also have operational structure in 8 countries. Of course, we also have 4 countries who never think of developing a qualification framework. So this year we are going to do a new survey to update this, and I hope that Korea can be a country somewhere, you know, not only documented but also operational. UNESCO has a publication book. I think this is also very important. Level setting and the recognition of learning outcomes. Okay, I think time is very limited. I don't want to give you too many. I hope we can receive more questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.